or an unexpected event. So whenever your program has a runtime error, then it generates an exception, and the result of this exception is that your program crashes. Since exceptions are objects, then from where these objects are created? These objects are created from classes that are defined in the Java API hierarchy of exception classes. API stands for Application Programming Interface, and it is a hierarchy of exception classes. For example, if your program tries to access an array using an index that is out of bounds, then your program will create an object from a class called ArrayIndexOutOfBounds exception. Also, in our previous example, when we wanted to compute the quotient between two numbers and the second number was equal to 0, we created an object from arithmetic exception, a class. So either the exception is thrown by a statement or a method in your program, or you throw an exception in your program using the throw statement. In either cases, the exception object must be created from one of these classes or from one of these classes extensions. Now, when exceptions are generated as objects, the technical words for generating objects of exceptions is throwing. So we say that a statement has thrown an exception. And when an exception is thrown, then it is the responsibility of the programmer to write code that detects and handles the exception. If the exception is left unhandled, then a long message will be displayed on the screen and the program will crash. And therefore, we said that the program did not terminate gracefully. Therefore, Java allows you to create exception handlers that will catch the exception whenever it is generated by any statement or a method. This can be done by using a try and catch a block. So what's the difference between exception handler and exception handling? An exception handler is a section of code that gracefully responds to exceptions and prevents these exceptions from crashing your program. However, exception handling is the process of intercepting and responding to exceptions. Both are done by a try and catch statement. The code you write inside the try and catch is in fact the section of code that makes your program gracefully respond to exceptions. So it is the exception handler. And the try and catch itself is responsible for catching the exceptions. So we say that it is handled by a try and catch statement. So try and catch statement is used for both as a handler and at the same time used for handling the exception. When an exception is thrown, the default exception handler simply prints an error message and crashes the program. And this is really what happened when we divided a number by 0. The program printed an error message as an exception and crashed the program. So it is the responsibility of the programmer to catch this exception. So programmers should handle the exceptions, and all exceptions in fact are instances of classes that are derived from a superclass called exception class. And we will show you in later examples on how to catch exceptions using this exception class. To handle an exception, as you have seen in the previous examples, we use a try followed by catch statements. The syntax for using a try catch statement is that you write a try followed by curly braces, and these curly braces are a must, so they are required, and inside the try you put the block statements for trying to execute, possibly they generate exceptions, followed by the catch statement. First, the keyword try indicates a block of code will be attempted. When we say attempted, it means tried for execution, and probably they will generate exceptions. So one or more statements that are executed inside a try and can potentially throw an exception. Now for every try, there must be a catch statement. So it is a must that you have a try and catch together in your program for handling exceptions. The syntax for catch is that you write the word catch, and between round brackets, the catch statement receives exceptions as parameters. Similar to methods, you start by defining the exception type followed by the parameter name. So exception type is the name of an exception class, and parameter name is a variable name which will reference the exception object if the code in the try block throws an exception. So any statement inside a try throws an exception, then it has already generated an object for this exception. This object is received in the catch statement as a parameter. The name of this object will be parameter name. As what we will see next in our examples, we will show you how to receive this object for an exception and how to deal with it. So the code that immediately follows the catch clause is known as catch block. Similar to try block, a catch block must have curly brackets, so they are required. So the code in the catch block is executed if the try block throws an exception. So this code will never be executed if there is no exception. The parameter must be of a type that is compatible with the thrown exceptions type. So when the program throws an arithmetic exception, then the parameter for this exception should be compatible with the arithmetic exception. After an exception, the program will continue execution at the point just past the catch block. So if there is no exception, then the catch block will be skipped. And if there is an exception, then the code inside catch will be executed, and immediately the program will continue and execute the statement that follows the catch block. Finally, each exception object has a method called getMessage. So when the catch block receives an exception object, this method of the object can be used to retrieve the default error message for the exception. Let us demonstrate the use of getMessage method by the following example in JGrasp.